Hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination. News, newsmakers, talking points, and we've got plenty on the show tonight. As the war in Gaza escalates, top voices from the Netanyahu government will be joining us live from Israel. Also, how should India be responding? We'll be joined by Shashi Tharoor and Jayant Sinha as they reflect upon India's stand and of the two main parties. Also, America's envoy to India, Eric Garcetti, confirms cricket will be part of the 2028 Olympics. We'll tell you more on the news today. Two very special guests are joining me. Dr. Ophir Falk is Foreign Policy Advisor in the Prime Minister's office in Tel Aviv, and Fleur Hassan Nahum is Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. Appreciate you, both of you, joining us. Fleur, why don't you start first? Give us a sense of how you see what is evolving. Do you believe that a hostage swap is possible? That should Israel go into Gaza without the safety of its own hostages, its own citizens first?
Well, first of all, you have to understand the trajectory that we've had over the last 4 days. We've gone from terrible surprise, trauma, to what happened to the attack. Everybody's been affected personally by this. We're in a small country and everybody knows somebody. I myself am very friendly with the mother of a boy who's actually one of the hostages. He's also an American citizen. And we've gone from 2 days of complete shock and trauma to evolving into now defiance. And of course, Israel's obligation, it's mainly to its citizens, of course, the captured hostages, and to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure. And this is what the Prime Minister has said, if we don't dismantle the terrorist infrastructure, then we've achieved nothing and they can attack us again. We're talking about a barbaric regime, an ISIS regime, which is the long arm of Iran. They will stop at nothing. They have zero value for life, not even their own. So why would they have value for our life? And Israel has to do whatever it needs to do to secure our citizens and to get our people back home.
Let me just take that specifically what you just said to Dr. Ophir Falk, because what it means, Dr. Ophir, is that you want to secure your citizens who are being held hostage by Hamas. At the same time, you want to virtually lay a siege over Gaza. Hamas is threatening to execute the hostages if buildings are pounded, but there is no let up at the moment in your attack on Gaza. How do you play it? How do you ensure that your citizens who are being held hostage, their lives are secure even while you attack Gaza?
Well, let me make this thing very clear. On October 7th, 2023, the Hamas waged war on Israel, an unprecedented war of barbarism. They've murdered close to 1,000 civilians, men, women, children, grandchildren. Hamas is ISIS. In fact, Hamas is ISIS on steroids. What they did is very similar to what you experienced in November 2008 in Mumbai, only on a scale of 50 times more. Over 1,000 citizens have been murdered, close to 1,000 innocent civilians have been murdered by these barbaric savages. Their goal was, one, to kill Jews, as many Jews as they could, to kidnap men, women, children, grandchildren, and to derail the peace prospects that Prime Minister Modi presented in the recent G20. Israel is on a counteroffensive now. There will be a counteroffensive that Hamas has never experienced before. Their capabilities will be dismantled. They will never be able to do such a thing again. We highly appreciate the support provided by world leaders around the world, from Prime Minister Modi, from President Biden, from almost every leader in the world that is trying to reach out to us, and we appreciate that significantly. This is a war of civilized states versus savages. and we are going to win this war. We have no other choice, and we will win this war.
Where does that leave, as I said, Dr. Falk, the hostages that are being held? They are Israeli citizens. We don't know how many of them. Do we know how many of them are being held hostage and what happens to their security and safety? In the past, Benjamin Netanyahu has even negotiated for one Israeli soldier who was held hostage a decade ago.
Any person who hurts any of the hostages will die. That's clear. We will dismantle the capabilities of Hamas to ever attack us again in the way that they did. Never again. Never again. So this is a war again, civilized states against barbarian savages.
Flair Hassan, Naum, you're hearing these strong words. Are you concerned that this war could now escalate out of control, as some fear? There could be the Hezbollah could get involved from the Lebanon, Israel-Lebanon border. Iran could get involved. Is that a fear that you have? And more and more innocent civilians will be caught in the crossfire.
Well, clearly, Hamas and Hezbollah in the north are proxies of Iran, clearly. Hamas's budget is 93% of Hamas's budget comes from Iran. That's one of the reasons that Hamas is not only ISIS, it's ISIS on steroids, being sponsored by a state entity, a terrorist state entity, by the way.
Right.
And the equation has changed, sir. The equation has changed. We are not in a military operation or a tit for tat. This is a war. This is a war of civilized states against savages, and we will win this war. We are very, very, very appreciative that the people of India, the Prime Minister of India, have expressed their unequivocal support for Israel and for humanity. We appreciate that. This is a war that will last as long as it is needed to last until we dismantle Hamas.
Flair Hassan, now let me take what I just heard from Dr. Falk forward. Do you fear, as Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, an escalation of this war in which more innocent civilians could die? Or do you believe this is the only way to send a message to Hamas after what's happened on the weekend?
Well, first of all, we live in Jerusalem, in a very delicate city. As you know, 40% of our population here is Muslim Arab, and we have enhanced the presence of our security forces. We know that we have some very small radical Hamas sleeper cells in the city, and we have our finger on the pulse. And so far, everything has remained calm. I think the Israeli forces are doing a wonderful job in ensuring that we don't have more fronts opening up for Israel. But even if they do, Israel is prepared for anything. We use a fraction of our power because we actually have a decent moral code, and we do everything that we can to avoid civilian casualties. But if we are pushed and tugged, then we will use it. And let me just tell you something else. And I completely agree with Dr. Falk. This is a civilizational war. We're talking about the long arm of Iran. Iran is a country and a regime that is killing its own women, its own people. Iran wants to take the world back 500 years. And it's no coincidence that this is happening right now when Israel had a very clear roadmap for peace with Saudi Arabia. This is the last thing that Hamas wants. This is the last thing that Iran wants, Israel to normalize with the rest of the Arab world, because then the region will be divided in two regions: the countries that want peace and prosperity and the countries that want destruction and radicalism. And we all know which side Israel is on, and I hope the world understands which side Hamas is on. It's on Iran's side, and Iran is not just a threat to us, it's a threat to the entire world. And so
you're
Israel
saying
will have to do whatever it takes
that, Flair
to
Hassan, but I had the Palestinian envoy to India yesterday on my show, and he said, look at Israel's occupation of our lands. They have dehumanized Palestinians. Netanyahu's politics has been divide and rule, and this is the price you're paying for pushing a people to the wall.
Well, let me ask, I hope you asked him what occupation is happening in Gaza when we left there almost 20 years in 2005. If we remember, Israel left. It was a painful departure. We had to pull out 7,000 Israelis, and they have been ruling themselves since. So what occupation are they talking about? Then people say to me, oh, but there's a blockade. And then I remind them that Gaza is actually bordered by Egypt as well as Israel. Israel brings in children for medical attention. We just gave 18,000 work permits to Gazans to come into Israel because, of course, Hamas does not develop its own economy. And so we give jobs and we let humanitarian in. So what occupation exactly are they talking about? Okay, you want to talk about Judea and Samaria, the West Bank.
They're talking about settlements. They're talking about an increase in settlements. They're talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, according to them.
Where? In Gaza? Where in Gaza? There's no settlements in Gaza.
They're talking about border settlements that are increasing, which they claim are violent. The Israelis are encircling them. You're saying all of this is propaganda. Am I correct?
What I'm saying is that when they want an excuse for a war, they find an excuse for a war. Let me tell you, I've been the deputy mayor of Jerusalem for almost 5 years, and all of the Al-Aqsa narrative is nonsense. Okay. Nobody does more to facilitate the freedom of worship than we do here in Israel. In 1 square kilometer, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have Jews, and we handle it very well. We, in fact, facilitate freedom of worship by bringing in transport, free transport, so that people can come to Al-Aqsa Mosque on every Ramadan Friday. But when they want to create a war, they send 200 hooligans, they start throwing rocks, and then they say that the Israeli forces are actually storming Temple Mount when they created the conflagration to begin with. So we're talking about a very sophisticated propaganda of victimhood. What they have to do, and what the world has to push the Palestinians to do, is take responsibility for themselves. Enough blaming Israel for their bad governance, for their extremism, and for a genocidal regime. Enough.
Dr. Falk, as a final question, will that siege therefore continue of the Gaza Strip, cutting off supplies? Again, there the fear is innocents will get lost. You're saying you will dismantle and destroy Hamas's infrastructure. How will you separate that from the civilians who exist in the Gaza Strip? They will lose their lives as you bomb buildings which you claim are part of the Hamas infrastructure. Isn't that a real fear? And the response from Palestinians is this is not the first time. Many of our civilians have lost their lives over the last decade or so.
Let me make it very clear. The Hamas, ISIS on steroids, waged war against Israel on October 7th, 2023. We are returning war. They wanted war, and they will receive war. They wanted war, and they will get war. We will dismantle the Hamas's capability to damage, to attack Israel.
How will you ensure that civilians are not killed in the process?
Exactly
how will you ensure, sir, that civilians are not killed in the process?
Excuse me?
How will you ensure that civilians are not killed in the process?
We have warned all civilians, all Gazans, long ago to get out of war zone, and we are now attacking Hamas with all our might, and we will dismantle Hamas's capability to attack innocent civilians in the process. This is a war of civilization against savages, and we expect everyone, all civilized people, all human beings, in fact, to support our war against ISIS and Hamas.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Falk. And thank you very much for joining me, Fleur, Hassan, Nahum. You all both have come with very strong views on what the Israeli position. We had the Palestinians yesterday. Today we have the Israeli position. That's what we try and do on the news today, and get a variety and diversity of opinion. Appreciate your joining us here. Politics has erupted over the war in Israel and Gaza, with the Congress Working Committee resolution yesterday calling for an immediate ceasefire, but not specifically targeting Hamas's terror. The BJP, on the other hand, seems to have decided that the Israeli government deserves full support. Take a look.
The Hamas terror attack on Israel and the counter-strike have sparked a political showdown here in India. The Congress finds itself in the eye of a storm after its highest decision-making body, the Congress Working Committee, passed a resolution on Monday. The CWC resolution expressed dismay and anguish on the war that has broken out in the Middle East. It reiterated its long-standing support for the rights of the Palestinian people to land, self-government and to live with dignity and respect. The CWC called for an immediate ceasefire and for negotiations to begin on all outstanding issues. However, there was no mention of Hamas or the terror attack on Israel, which has drawn flack from the BJP.
कांग्रेस हमेशा कंफ्यूज रही है और कांग्रेस के नेता भी कंफ्यूज रहे और इसलिए कभी भी वो देश के साथ नहीं चले। जब हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री ने कहा कि हम इजराइल का समर्थन करते हैं तो फिर सारे देश को उनके साथ खड़ा होना चाहिए, पर कांग्रेस आतंकवादियों को समर्थन कर रही। कांग्रेस का हाथ आतंकवादियों के साथ।
जो लोग कांग्रेस पार्टी के ये रेजोल्यूशन को देखकर राजनीतिकरण कर रहे हैं, मुझे तो लगता है अफसोस की बात है। जब हम सब दुखी हैं, हम सब वहाँ पे जो भी भारतवासी हैं, आज इजराइल में हो या गजा में हो, हम चाहते हैं कि हमारे भारत के नागरिक सुरक्षित रहे, भारत के नागरिक वापस आए। ध्यान तो यहाँ पे होना चाहिए।
In its first reaction on Sunday, the Congress had condemned the brutal attacks on the people of Israel, but it did not name Hamas or call it a terror attack. The BJP in its first reaction had tried to score a political point by comparing UPA government's actions after 26/11 with Israeli counter-attack on Hamas. Opposition parties like the PDP, National Conference and the CPM have voiced their support for the Palestinian cause.
बदकिस्मती ये है कि पूरी दुनिया जो है वो जब इजराइल जुल्म करता है, फलस्तीन को कत्ल करता है तो वो खामोश रहते हैं, और जब अब हमस ने इजराइल के लोगों के साथ नाइंसाफी की, उनके साथ जुल्म किया, वहाँ इंसानी हुकूक की पामाली की, तो सारे लोगों में हाहाकार मची है। मैं समझती हूँ ये गलत है, ये सिलेक्टिव आउटरेज है, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए।
Another Congress ally, the Shiv Sena UBT, condemned the unprovoked escalation by Hamas.
जिस तरीके से इजराइल पे बमबारी हुई और हमास जो एकदम टेरर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है और उन्होंने इनोसेंट सिविलियंस को भी टारगेट किया है, उनको काबू में किया है, इनको जेल किया है, उनको अपने पास रखा है, वो बिल्कुल गलत है। और यहाँ पर जो जनता, जो सिविलियन पॉपुलेशन है, उनके ऊपर जो पूरा ये वॉर का तकलीफें आएंगी वो दुनिया को झेलनी पड़ेंगी।
Indian political parties usually speak in one voice on matters of diplomacy. The war between Israel and Hamas has, however, marked a shift. Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now is the Congress MP from Thiruvananthapuram, someone who's had a wide experience in international diplomacy, also been a Minister of State for External Affairs, Shashi Tharoor. Thank you very much for joining me here on India Today. Let's get your stand, Dr. Tharoor, clear. The Prime Minister today has tweeted a little while ago, I thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for his phone call and providing an update on the ongoing situation. People of India stand firmly with Israel in this difficult hour. India strongly and unequivocally condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Is that a stand you also support unequivocally?
Yes, but it's not the whole picture. In other words, we do absolutely stand with Israel when they're being attacked in such a horrendous way and civilians are being killed. But we also do take the broader view in mind, Rajdeep. Our traditional position has always been that both Israelis and Palestinians have the right to live in security and dignity behind safe borders in their own lands. And the fact that in the case of the Palestinians, they've been suffering a dehumanizing occupation for a very long time, and that for 75 years there has been no durable solution to their plight, despite many attempts by the UN, by various states to try and get a solution. That, I think, remains a matter of great concern. So we don't want to lose sight of that. In other words, we want the Palestinian people to have decent, secure lives. We want the Israeli people to have decent, secure lives. We condemn terrorism, but at the same time, we don't want to see a situation in which the Palestinians feel they have no recourse but to resort to violence. There's a peace process which has been stagnating for many years. And I think that this is something that have to be looked at as a whole, Rajdeep. The immediate situation, yes, Israel and Israeli civilians are being grotesquely treated. There's really been brutal assaults on innocent, ordinary people who are not soldiers or fighters. And I think that's terrorism by any yardstick, and we can't accept that. And I think there India is absolutely justified in standing with Israel. But in the bigger picture, we also stand with the Palestinian people. And we want to see the Palestinian people obtain their rights to decent lives as an independent state.
The reason I asked you this is because the Congress Working Committee, of which you are a part, as part of their resolution yesterday, stated or reaffirmed their support for the Palestinian cause, for a Palestinian state and a peaceful resolution to the issue, but refused to explicitly condemn Hamas or the terrorism emanating from the Hamas. So you're saying that you see what's happened in Israel as terrorism, but your own party refrained from using the words Hamas or terrorism. And that leads some to believe that the Congress hasn't gone far enough in condemning the acts that have been perpetrated on innocent civilians.
First of all, there was an official statement by the Congress party the previous day, which was broadly along the lines that I have just responded to, because I myself had issued a tweet at about the same time in which I made precisely this point. So I think for many of us, the position is indeed a balanced one. We're not suggesting that there can be any sort of two-sidedness to terror. There is no excuse for terror. But at the same time, we cannot possibly be thrilled about the long period of injustice to the Palestinian people as well. And that's why I think finding a decent...
But do you explicitly condemn Hamas? Do you explicitly condemn Hamas, Dr. Tharoor? Do you explicitly condemn Hamas and see it as a terrorist organization?
Well, the terrorist organization label is one we're very careful not to follow other countries' leads in these matters. The US considers Hamas a terrorist organization, so does Israel. India has not made any such classification, and I'm going to stick to the Indian position that these are terrorist acts. But to call everybody in Hamas, there are political elements of Hamas who one day we may have to negotiate with, or the Israelis may have to negotiate with. So let me just say these are terrorist acts. There's never any excuse for terrorism. India must condemn it unreservedly, and I agree with the government that they condemned it and they stood with the victims of terror. But we want to lose sight at the same time of the fact that the Palestinians also have rights, and those rights have been systematically violated over a long period of time. Let me say also, when you ask about the Congress position, that there will be more detailed positions. The resolution focused overwhelmingly on domestic affairs, and language that got into the resolution essentially as an afterthought is to remind people of our long-standing commitment to the Palestinian people. But the larger, broader, more nuanced picture will surely emerge in future statements. This problem, sadly, is not going to end in a day or two, and nor should we take any one statement as the total picture or the last word on the subject. We are all aware that there is terrible wrong that's been civilians by Hamas, and that cannot be condoned. And we are seeing images of terrible destruction and killing on the other side. There are civilians dying in Gaza as well. There are journalists who've been killed in Gaza. There's terrible stuff happening on both sides of the border. And now, just as I was waiting to talk to you, I hear your reporter saying that Hezbollah may have been trying to cross the border from Lebanon, which means we're talking about potentially a much wider and more serious war. This is at a time when, in fact, the region seemed to be heading towards peace, where the Arab countries had made their peace with Israel, the so-called Abraham Accords, which brought the UAE in. You know, India itself was part of the so-called I2U2, which was India and the UAE joining with the Americans and the Israelis in collective dialogue. On top of that, there were very strong reports of the Saudis making peace with the Israelis. That, of course, is now on hold, and some say that perhaps Hamas was really targeting that. But the point is that it's sad and tragic when people who are beginning to get used to the idea of living in peace are suddenly confronted once again by war. War never solves anything. I was with Kofi Annan when we met the Israeli foreign minister nearly 20 years ago, and he informed us of the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza at that time, after a long occupation of Gaza. Now, the Israelis are marching back into Gaza, and undoubtedly they have superior strength, and they will probably be once again in occupation of Gaza. And I have no doubt that the situation will not be any different. They will again, at some point, feel they have to cut their losses and leave, because this cycle will keep repeating itself until you have a durable solution. And that is, frankly, what is really needed, what India has been calling for.
What is that? No, but as you said, when you were in the United Nations, there have been efforts made on this for decades. What, according to you, is a solution? And given the scale of the attacks, the audacity of it, the possibility that other countries, especially Iran, Lebanon, the Hezbollah in particular, could be involved, suggests that we could be heading towards a wider war, which makes peace even more difficult. What is that solution that you see happening? I mean, is this the intractable problem of the 21st century?
Well, it seemed that way for 75 years, but in fact, the outlines of a solution have been clear for more than 3 decades. And the solutions are very simple. 2 states living side by side in peace and security with clearly defined borders, and at the same time with some international guarantees that one will not attack the other. And for this, you need to have responsible and moderate leadership on both sides. The Palestinian Authority did have that leadership, and they did not find an adequate response on the Israeli side. The Israelis under Netanyahu have continued a settlement building, for example, in the occupied territories in the West Bank in particular, which undoubtedly prolonged an occupation that could have been ended with a recognition of a Palestinian state, which still hasn't happened. The formula of 2 states with secure borders for both peoples is the only formula that can solve the problem. But increasingly, actions on the ground are making the 2-state solution more and more unviable. It was getting more unviable as Israeli settlements were spreading across the occupied territory, so there would have been no real room for a Palestinian state. Now it's getting unviable with the attacks from Gaza into Israel, and now Israel's counterattack. Now, if you say Hezbollah has crossed the border, which I had not yet seen until I heard it on your show, then Hezbollah will drag in undoubtedly some elements of southern Lebanon, and also possibly, since both Hezbollah and Hamas are backed by Iran, Iran might also become a target. The whole thing becomes incredibly worrying. Americans have, I gather, sent a ship already to Israel, a destroyer, and there's going to be more such international involvement as well. We don't want another wide war. India has always stood for peace in that region.
You know, but in conclusion, Dr. Tharoor, you're saying India has always stood for peace. India also, particularly in recent times, has seen Israel as an all-weather ally, someone with whom we have closer defense cooperation, we have closer partnerships, strategic partnerships emerging. To that extent, would you say that this policy of neutrality that we had towards supporting the Palestinian cause and yet having relations with Israel, that's gone? There's a very special relationship that exists today between India and Israel, and at some level between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah, but you can't personalize these matters. Yes, I think it's important that our Prime Minister maintains good links with other Prime Ministers. I think that's a human thing, and that's always welcome and valuable. But ultimately, national interests trump personal chemistry. And the national interest of India is in seeing that all sides get a fair deal out of this. Yes, Israel has been an invaluable partner, particularly on strategic security matters. They've also been good people-to-people relations. We have, in fact, Indian civilians right now in Israel, one of whom was injured in the rocket attacks from Gaza, and others who are in danger. And we would like very much that Israel look after the security of our citizens in their country as well. So we have a valued relationship with Israel, but at the same time, we have historically stood for justice for the Palestinian people as well, and I don't think it would be right for us to back away from that. So let us make sure that we, in condemning terrorism, don't lose sight of the bigger picture affecting the Palestinians. That is a serious matter, and it's something which goes right back to the days of Mahatma Gandhi before independence, when he took a stand on the idea of a proposed Jewish state. And I must say that for us, that decent, where both sides are right, both sides deserve the best kind of approach, is the right thing for India. There is no reason for India to be unilaterally condemning either the Palestinians or the Israelis. We can condemn terrorist actions, but then we should equally be concerned about the denial of long-term rights of the Palestinians and equally be concerned about the death, devastation, and destruction being visited right now upon the Palestinians as part of the Israeli retaliation. No one is accusing the Israelis of having started this. It's started by Hamas, but their retaliation, including the siege of Gaza, where they've cut off water, electricity, fuel, essential supplies into a strip of land that otherwise can't be provisioned, is actually a pretty dangerous step in humanitarian terms. So I don't think that it's a pure black and white situation, Razi.
Okay, let's leave it there. It's a more nuanced position that you've taken, and one perhaps that needs to be supported across political lines, that while you condemn Hamas and the terror that has taken place against innocent civilians, you've also got to be conscious about the dehumanizing that's taken place over the years of the Palestinian people. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Tharoor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Razi.
I'm joined by BJP MP, former Minister Jayant Sinha joins me. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Sinha. I want to get a sense of how you at the BJP and the government sees what's happening at the moment in Gaza and Israel. Are you very clear, as the Prime Minister says, terrorism in all its manifestations and forms must be condemned, must be rejected, and therefore the Hamas must be seen in this instance as the principal villain of the peace?
Rajdeep, very good evening to you. The Honorable Prime Minister has been very forthright and clear in articulating India's position, which has been consistent now throughout our government, which is that we condemn terrorism in all forms, that we have said, and the Honorable Prime Minister has become very well known for having said it, that this is not the era, the age for war. That we have to follow the UN Charter, that we have to ensure that all disputes and issues are resolved peacefully and through mediation. This kind of an unprecedented assault on innocent civilians and the death of more than 900 Israeli civilians through these brutal attacks is terrorism and is not acceptable in a civilized world. If there are issues, if there are challenges, there are channels, there are mechanisms for communication, for discussion, where these issues can be resolved and dealt with. But we cannot have, in today's very volatile and turbulent global geopolitical situation, these kinds of very terrible and very, very destructive and brutal attacks, particularly on civilians.
But what is very interesting is the Prime Minister was very quick to offer support to Israel. On the other hand, there is very little mention, if any at all, of the Palestinian state or our traditional support to the idea of the Palestinian state. So while the Congress is being accused of not mentioning Hamas explicitly in its CWC resolution, the BJP has been extremely silent when it comes to the sufferings of the Palestinian people.
Rajdeep, we have to first deal with an act of terrorism, which is what we are confronting right now. Once these hostilities cease, once the terrorism stops, once this kind of, frankly, cross-border terrorism stops, then we can discuss legitimate demands on both sides. But these cannot be done in this environment of hostility and this kind of unprecedented attack on innocent civilians. India, as you know, has been the victim of these kinds of attacks on innocent civilians as well. We remember them all too well, unfortunately. And you don't negotiate at gunpoint. It's not possible to have any kind of discussion or any kind of negotiation when these kinds of hostilities and these kinds of cross-border terrorist acts are being undertaken.
But it almost seems as if the BJP is very clear, Israel is our all-weather friend and ally, and therefore we will stand with Israel. To that extent, that seems a slight departure from the past when the Congress was in power, when their first reaction would be to emphasize or reaffirm their support for a Palestinian state. For example, the BJP tweeted on the 7th of October, what Israel is facing today, India suffered between 2004 and 14. Never forgive, never forget. So am I right in suggesting that the BJP is very clear, we will put our weight behind Israel at a moment like this?
Rajdeep, we are against cross-border terrorism. We are against targeting innocent civilians. We are against these kinds of unprovoked hostilities. And clearly, Israel is suffering from that right now. Israel is a victim of this right now. And whether it is Israel in this particular instance or whether it was the 9/11 attack on the United States, we have always condemned and always come in support of those that are suffering from cross-border terrorism, because we have suffered from it so extensively. Now, that being said, we have friends across the Middle East. We have good relationships with all of the players in the Middle East. As you know, right now, there has been a very serious discussion ongoing between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which is another country with which we have very friendly relations, to be able to come up with an accord which will further stabilize the Middle East. We also have very good relationships with other players in the Middle East, such as Iran. And so our goal across all of these different relationships and all that's happening in the Middle East is to ensure stability, is to ensure peace. And again, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, this is not the era for war. This is the era for stable relationships between countries, for democracy, for freedom, and for prosperity. We are already globally facing many, many serious challenges, like, of course, the issues that we are dealing with respect to climate change, the pandemic that we've just dealt with, the debt crisis that many countries are dealing with right now. So under these circumstances, with all these global challenges, to, in a completely, brutal way, to establish this kind of a cross-border terrorist act is really not what the world needs right now.
But how concerned should we be, given that this Israel-Hamas war comes less than a month after India, along with the US, Saudi Arabia, UAE, France, Germany, Italy, European Union had announced an ambitious India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor during the G20 summit. Is this a huge setback? And is that a concern? Even the Saudis at the moment aren't openly willing in a way to support Israel. So will that be a huge setback to this idea of this ambitious corridor?
We need economic stability. We need good relationships with all the players in the Middle East so that game-changing initiatives like this Middle Eastern Economic Corridor can be initiated for the sustainable prosperity of all of the countries associated with this. This is precisely why this is not the era for war. This is the era for cooperation. This is the era for trade. This is the era for economic growth and ensuring prosperity for all people. If we can collaborate in that fashion and if we can work together, then we can help everyone. The Israelis, the Palestinians, the Saudis, the Iranians, everybody will benefit from these kinds of cooperative and collaborative arrangements, which is exactly what we have tried to do through our continued still we are presidents of the whole G20 process. And you know, Vasudev Kutumbakam was actually our slogan through the entire G20, and it tells you very clearly what our approach is, which is one earth, one family, one future. That's really what we are working to achieve.
You know, in conclusion, I get a sense that at one level there's this diplomatic tightrope walk, given the fact that we have strong relationships with moderate Gulf states. At the same time, we have a strong relationship now with Israel. There's a personal chemistry, it appears, between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And many are saying Prime Minister Netanyahu, we put all our eggs in his basket, and he finds himself under pressure after these terror attacks. How much of this is this, therefore, diplomatic tightrope walk that India will have to do in the months ahead?
The Honorable Prime Minister and, of course, the Honorable Foreign Minister and the National Security Advisor have very good relationships with everybody in the Middle East. The Honorable Prime Minister has been awarded the highest honor that can be received in the UAE, in Egypt, and many other countries in the Middle East. So he is very well respected. He is very well regarded across the Middle East. And that enables India to be able to put together initiatives like the Middle Eastern Economic Corridor.
Okay, let's bring you some good breaking news. The good breaking news is that it is now confirmed. Cricket will be an Olympic sport. Cricket will be an Olympic sport in 2028. On record now, the US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, has confirmed that both men's and women's T20 cricket will be included in the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028. The first time the sport is coming to the Olympics since 1900, when France played England in a single gold medal match. Okay, folks, the World Cup is here, cricket fever is here, but guess what? It could get even bigger, because all indications are that cricket could be an Olympic sport at the 2028 Los Angeles Games. The first time since 1900 that cricket will be in the Olympics. What does this mean? Who better to answer that than the US ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, the former mayor of Los Angeles. Welcome, Mr. Garcetti.
Great to see you, my friend.
What have you done? You've got cricket at the Olympics in Los Angeles. Have you got something to do with that?
Well, I've got cricket fever, just like you. And when I was mayor of Los Angeles, we brought the Olympics. But one of the things you get to do when you win the Olympics is bring new sports or old sports into the games. So I've been working very hard for a number of years, saying we have cricket, this huge sport with hundreds of millions of fans around the world. And for some reason, it's not been in the Olympics for over 100 years. So I worked very closely with the chair of the Olympics, so my good friend Casey Wasserman, who's the chair of the LA 28 Olympics. And we both decided a few years ago, let's see if we could get cricket in the games. I never dreamed I'd be the ambassador in India, the capital of cricket in the world, when this announcement was going to happen here during an International Olympic Committee meeting.
That's fantastic, because, you know, the fact is that cricket in America have had a vexed relationship. You know, every now and then we try to push cricket to America. The T20 league is there, but America has somehow always preferred apple pie and baseball. Is that changing?
Well, it's interesting. You know, America actually has a long history with cricket. The first international match ever played,
that's right,
1844, in the United States, in the state of New York. And yeah, we became a baseball country, but because we're such an immigrant culture, we have folks from India, from South Asia, from Australia, from New Zealand, from Britain, from all over the Caribbean. In fact, Americans are the second biggest streamers of cricket. So we've watched cricket as Americans, but we have never had it. This year that changed with Major League Cricket, which just started. You know, Shah Rukh Khan has a team in my hometown, Los Angeles.
That's right.
So it's beginning to catch with folks who are, you know, traditionally not cricket fans. And then we've got millions of cricket fans already in America. But we just thought this is a gift to India, a gift to the world to include cricket in the Olympics finally. And I know it's going to get the medal count up for India too.
That's right. And is it a sign also of the sort of Indian American immigrant community coming to, you know, becoming more and more influential in the United States, that they love their cricket, which is perhaps why they're live streaming the sport, but this is a recognition in a way of their role in American society today?
You know, Indians and Americans of Indian descent are changing America every day for the better. And you have people like Satya Nadella, who, you know, heads up Microsoft, and he owns one of the Major League Cricket teams with friends who are Indians, who pooled their money together and said, why do we just have to watch it across an ocean or over a border? Let's do it here. So whether it's the CEOs of companies, whether it's new immigrants who have come there, even the second and third generation children who are raised just as Americans, but they have that passion that their mother or their father taught them about cricket. So the time is ripe. We're going to make history, and we're going to do it during the World Cup right here in India.
I've got to ask you this. You know, if you had to pick between baseball and cricket, no-brainer, would you sort of you know, go with all your LA teams instead of going with maybe one of our IPL teams? Is that?
Well, I love both. And I'm a Dodgers fan. We're in the playoffs. We've just lost the first two games. We're on our last rope, but I'm still praying for my Dodgers. And there's nothing that beats a baseball game with friends. But cricket is something that I've always loved. I lived in the UK for a while. I played a little bit there. And my message to Americans is you don't have to choose between cricket and baseball. In the same way that people thought soccer, as we call it, would never take off in America, you can love American football and world football too. So we've seen that change. I feel it myself, and I've gone to a few IPL matches. I went to the Delhi match. I went to one 2 actually in Ahmedabad, went to the finals in Ahmedabad, but then it got rained out.
Yep.
And to me, there's actually excitement all the time. Even more than baseball, there's constant action. Constant action. So while baseball, I think, is the more kind of meditative afternoon, take it slow, enjoy time with friends, cricket is like action, action, action. So that's the pitch to Americans. If you want baseball, but with more hits, more throws all the time, check out cricket.
That's interesting because for the longest time, cricket was seen as a leisurely colonial sport. Played over 5 days, Test cricket. We've come to T20, which is suited to the American way of life, and it's sort of changed the way the game is. Are you going to go to see India versus Pakistan, possibly in Ahmedabad? One of 120,000 people in that stadium?
I would love to, but I think it's the same day that the Olympics will start. So I don't know if I can get up there and get back to the Olympic Committee meeting where we have to ensure the final vote happens. LA's already approved it. Now the blessing needs to come from the International Olympic Committee. But maybe we'll see them back together in the finals and I can get there in Ahmedabad.
So what will this mean? You know, having cricket at Los Angeles, what will it mean for the sport? Do you see it as the sort of final frontier of the globalization of cricket? Because we've always seen America and possibly China as the 2 final frontiers for cricket to go well beyond the Commonwealth.
Well, I'm confident that somebody investing in cricket in America right now is going to see it take off. But it's not really an investment for America. This is a recognition that cricket already is a great global sport. In fact, it's one of the greatest global sports. Tell me any other league where you have the national teams, besides the World Cup for soccer, that comes together and plays nation versus nation. And cricket does it 2 or 3 times a year. World Cup happens only, every 4 years or so. So we, I think, recognize that this is time. We are excited as an immigrant country and a country tied to India to do it now. The time is right. Let's get it done.
Have you been stunned in your time in India with just the sheer enthusiasm for the game? Look at it here. And I look at this, and the big change for me is women playing the sport as well. That is. Are you hoping to have a men's and women's sport at the Olympics? Will there be 2 medals at stake?
We want women's and men's.
Wow.
Mitali Raj and I were together in Mumbai. She's my favorite cricketer, by the way, and she, taught me a couple things. And to see girls' teams, to see women's teams, this is a universal sport. It doesn't matter what country you live in. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. Cricket dreams are ripe here. And I always joke with my American friends when they say, so explain India and cricket. I say, well, India has 3 favorite sports. Cricket, cricket, and cricket. And the rest are all after that. So it really is almost a religion here. It's a way of life. People live and breathe it. And if you want to, you can almost watch cricket year-round, someplace or another, so it's time to add the Olympics.
That's right. We're happy that we've now got a javelin thrower, gold medal winner, and we're growing in badminton and other sports. But cricket is part of our being. I lived my early years in Mumbai, and you couldn't do without cricket. It was cricket and cinema. I say cricket, cinema, and music are the 3 ways into an Indian's heart.
Well, don't forget food.
And food, and food.
But truly, and I think here in India, what you see too is you can't understand India as an outsider if you don't understand India's love affair with cricket.
There is a poster I have at home, Cricket is explained to an American visitor, about how people go in and out, and when all of them are out, that's when the game is over. But I can see that we finally got an American ambassador who understands his cricket.
Oh, I can do this. Yesterday I was at a dinner with 25 European ambassadors, and one of them said, I don't understand cricket. And I took 2 salt shakers and 2 cups, and in less than a minute I explained it. He said, that's the best explanation I've ever heard.
Not bad at all. So cricket is truly global.
It is.
When you've got the American ambassador explaining cricket to European ambassadors, you know you've arrived. How good a player are you?
I'm a very beginning player. I love to bat. We'll send you some pictures. Recently I played with our U.S. Embassy team, which is a very good team of our Indian employees and some Americans. But, I don't know. You be the judge. I'll go maybe hit a few balls.
Yeah, I'm going to get you because, Alex Ellis, the British High Commissioner, is also obsessed with cricket. I think
British,
I think we're going to have a British High Commissioner versus American Ambassador match soon.
Well, I better get practice because he has, I think, a few decades of practice on me.
Come on. The Americans, once they take to a sport, make sure they're good at it.
True.
That's the American way of doing things. But we're going to test Mr. Garcetti's abilities with the bat. Are you going to bat?
I'm going to bat.
Okay.
Let's do it. Are you going to bowl?
I'm going to bowl. I was a batsman. I'm going to bowl, but I will try and see if I can get the American ambassador around.
All right.
We'll
well,
try.
no Yorkers, all right?
Okay, no Yorkers. I'm very poor. Go for it.
All right.
I want to introduce you to someone. Ragini Malhotra is the head coach here.
Ragni is my coach.
She's a National Cricket Academy coach, so she's very good. And I was just telling the ambassador Ragini how women are now taking to cricket, right?
Yeah.
You've got what, 50% women here now?
No, not say 50%, almost say 25 to 30%.
Yeah.
And good?
And good. And a lot of our girls have been selected in state.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And the ambassador just told us cricket is going to be included in the Olympics
Yeah.
in 28.
Yeah, that's a good news for the girls.
Huh? They could get a they could get a gold medal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They got a gold medal, right.
What is the big change you've seen?
Media coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And getting sponsors. But basically things changed after BCCI took over the women's cricket.
So
I played before that, so there was nothing for us.
There was nothing for you? How much were you paid per match in those days?
We used to pay ourselves.
Yeah, that's the big change.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Now they get.
And it's the same pay, right? IPL.
That's right. That's right. We're going to give,
amazing.
if you play for India, woman or a male cricketer get the same amount of money.
Jay Shah, my friend, he said he made that happen. So
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
great. That's
yeah.
a great news. As
That's
in now they are wherever the men are traveling, women are also traveling.
Great. That's where it should be.
A lot of exposure.
If you had to give one tip to Ambassador Garcetti in batting, what's the one tip you'd tell him? Kuch to bol do. What is that one tip?
I just want to change his grip.
You want to change his grip? Show him the right grip.
I went up too high, right?
Okay. No, it was not too high. You was keeping here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm used
So,
to in baseball.
yeah, that is the base.
So why do you put it by your toe? Because then it's a longer time.
No,
to
you
get
see,
it.
in
no,
cricket,
it is
you
wrong.
hit with the top hand.
Right. Well, and now I've got till 2028 to make the American team.
Yeah, you got to have an American team, surely.
Yeah.
And you've got a chance to
Absolutely.
represent your country in the Olympics. But it's fantastic.
It's an amazing sport.
You know, it is great to know that cricket is going to be in the Olympics. We can announce that officially now,
Yep.
almost officially.
Yeah, it's going to
And
happen.
It's going to happen on the 16th, and that's going to be a huge transformation in the sport. Ambassador, you've taken the time off.
No.
It's not exactly a cool October. That's okay.
But
right?
I will sweat for cricket any day.
Wonderful.
And
Wonderful
congratulations to India.
Thank you
because
very
this
much.
wouldn't have happened without India's love of cricket.
That is great to hear. So thank you very much. Great news. I might actually now get back to practicing because who knows? There may be an Olympic medal in my life still there. What do you think? Rajdeep Sardesai with an Olympic medal for India today. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Ambassador.
Absolutely.